I'm the editor of Campaign, and I'm sure you've heard of Campaign. We're a magazine, we're a website, we've got social, we've got a newsletter, we've got podcasts, we've got skywriting. You can get a tattoo of us, it's all. So, yeah, do make sure you sort of keep following Campaign. And currently Campaign is working on our client-side Faces to Watch. There's some copies of the magazine where we've highlighted the best sort of up-and-coming young talent in agencies aged 30 and under, and some great people there. And now we're currently working on the client side of this. So if you are an agency who work with any amazing clients who are 30 or under, if you're on the client and brand side yourself, do get over to our website and make sure that you nominate these people, because it's really, it's one of my favorite bits in the magazine, to be honest, is where we get to highlight sort of up-and-coming talent. There's some of you here are familiar faces in the magazine. You'll look around, you'll see people who are published, and it's also really nice to give people their first sort of acknowledgement in an industry title. So do try and get your entries in for that. I think that closes on the 1st, so anytime this week or start of next week, no later. We're also working on a Saudi event. Next month on the 14th, I think, is it the 14th? We are going to be in Riyadh at, what's the venue? Crown Plaza in Riyadh. So having our first ever on-the-ground event in Saudi. I don't know whether any of you have heard, but apparently Saudi's quite popular these days, and there might be some stuff happening there. So it ought to be amazing. Nadim's been there already to check it out, and if you want to get involved, do speak to him. So, without too much more ado, welcome to Campaign's Breakfast Briefing Video 2022 Moving Pictures. That was my title. We're going to be talking about all things video. Luckily, I won't, but a lot of people who really know about video on all sizes of screens are going to be up here talking. So, some of the people who know a lot more about video than me are our sponsors, obviously. So I'd just like to sort of give them a quick bit of acknowledgement for helping support us. One is Dailymotion, which is a global video streaming service with an ecosystem of more than 2,000 content publishers who use the Dailymotion player, and it has more than 30 million monthly viewers just in MENA alone. Dailymotion is partnered with DMS, who I'm sure you all know is the digital arm of Shaweri Group, one of our long-time partners. And it's allowed both parties to offer brand-safe, effective, and impactful video advertising solutions to brands across the region, especially with Enroll's recent commercial offerings elevating video creativity and market. Now, if you don't know what Enroll is, find somebody from DMS who will explain it. We're also sponsored by MENA. And again, I don't know whether any of you have heard of MENA. It's this, they're an up-and-coming young company that shows some potential, and we're proud to be backing them to help them get off the ground. MENA builds technologies that help people connect, find communities, and grow businesses. When Facebook launched in 2004, it changed the ways people connect. Apps like Messenger, Instagram, WhatsApp further empower billions around the world. Now Meta's moving beyond 2D screens towards immersive experiences like augmented and virtual reality to help build the next evolution in social technology. We're going to have some people from Meta here. We're going to have some people from DMS here. So I'm going to go straight into introducing my first panel, who have much more interesting things to say than me. The first panel is going to be who owns the viewers, not physically, and what are the rules of engagement. And to speak about this, we're joined by Ian Manning, who is our moderator, who is the CEO of the IAB, that's the International Advertising Bureau, something like that. You can spell it out, GCC. Interactive, sorry. GCC, that's Gulf Corporation Council. Matthew Yarak, who's the Group Senior Director of Data and Insights at Shaweri Group, I'm sure you all know. Roxanne Gahal, who's the Director of Strategy at OMD UAE. And Badr Burji, who is the Director of Marketing Experience Hub at Yas Island. And Wissam Yamak, who is the Regional Digital and Media Manager at Colgate Palmolive. So thank you very much, everybody, and I'll let you take to the stage.
Right, good morning, everybody. As you just heard, my name's Ian. I'm from the Interactive Advertising Bureau, and I lead the IAB here for the region, for MENA actually, although we're called GCC, strangely. So yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about video today, but I also wanted to make it clear that up front, there's nothing worse than on Friday morning sitting and listening to a bunch of talking heads at the front of the room, I don't think, no matter how good the talking heads might be. So we're really interested in hearing from you as well. So get yourselves ready to take part, get yourselves ready to ask some questions. We'll certainly be referring to you during the discussions to see if anyone does have any questions or anything that you want to raise, disagree with. Please no storming onto the stage. That's become pretty uncool since the Oscars. So if you can avoid that, but you certainly are welcome to your opinions and you're welcome to disagree with any of our panelists. Yes, yes. Yes, as they will potentially disagree with each other. Right, so who's interested in a fun discussion around video today? Yeah, there we go. You see already interacting. That's what we like to see. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves because they'll be able to do that a lot better than I will, as you've already told by my introduction. So I'll start with Roxanne on my left here, who will introduce herself and we'll go through to the end.
Hello.
Digital age, and I always have the technical difficulties, I swear. Thanks, Ian. Hey everyone, I'm Roxanne. I'm actually the head of strategy for OMD UAE. It's my new role. I've been at OMD for nearly a decade. So, I find this panel very interesting because I actually started as a TV planner way back in the day where like 80 to 90% of budgets were just on your offline media, especially when you're on CPG, and now we're just seeing this migration. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Wissam. I'm the media and digital manager for Colgate Palmolive. I also manage CRM and retail media at the organization. Previously, I've took roles across agencies, and I've been in the industry for almost 14 years now. Nice to see you all.
Hi guys. Okay, that's too much. Usually I have a high. Hi guys. So I'm Mathieu and I had the data and insights for Shwairi Group. Been with the group for 7.5 years and in the industry for almost 16 years. So I started where TV measurement is done at Ipsos. But then I moved to the media agency side with Media Edge. At that time I had the research and measurement, and now with Shwairi Group. And nice to see you all.
Hello. My name is Badr Burji. I'm the Director of Marketing for Experience Hub. Experience Hub is the DMO for Yas Island, Abu Dhabi, and Saadiyat Island. I've been in my position for like 2.5 years now, so pretty much like a COVID baby. And before that, I had different stints. I started my career off as a client in Nespresso, moved into agency side before I moved back to the dark side. So that's it in a nutshell.
All right, so thanks very much, guys. I mean, it sounds like you guys should know a little bit about video planning and the way that this works, so hopefully we've got the right people up here. So I guess when you think about who owns the viewers, the most viewers, I guess, in prime time, well, that's what we would assume. And prime time is a key part of, certainly in the days of television-only planning, prime time was a key part of planning. And I wonder today if that's still the case. How do we think about prime time, given the way that people are communicating, whether that be through mobile, through digital, through television itself? It sounds to me like it's not as simple as it used to be. Maybe Roxanne, if you want to talk from an agency perspective.
Yeah, of course. I mean, when you're in the industry of planning campaigns, context is literally everything. But beyond context, it's really about understanding where consumers are. Why are they consuming certain touch points? So the notion of prime time, it's just evolved a lot, right? We just have these pockets of time in the day. It just kind of evolved over time. So for example, the whole notion of attention. Where do we capture the most attention in the day? When we were dictated by certain, I'd say the 6 or 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. prime time, when you're basing viewership habits on people just gathering on the TV, that was back in the day. Now your first screen is your mobile device, right? And you're pretty much on it 12, 13 hours a day. So it's really not about what dictates people's time or how they consume that time, but essentially like where they're most attentive and what are you trying to tell them when you're trying to capture that moment of time in the day, how you're trying to capture their attention. So it's essentially, I think the battleground or the notion of prime time is not dictated by certain pockets of time in the day anymore. It's just about the quality of time that people spend, I guess.
I'll add on top of it, and I'm gonna tease with some of it on the prime time level. So yeah, Roxanne mentioned that it's about the different pockets of time during the day when the user is attentive, consuming content, and so on. I'll take a step back. So we recently did a research with Holland Partners to better identify the video dynamics, okay, the consumption of video, and I mean content, regardless of the screen, big, small, or whatever. And when we talk about the prime time, the findings, which is a bit surprising for me, it's that now it's about one prime time for all the different video content that's consumed. Typically, when we used to talk about TV, we used to talk about the 7 to 9 or 8 to 10. When we used to talk about VOD, it's like when TV starts dipping, then VOD starts increasing in terms of consumption. When we talk about digital video, let's say being on Dailymotion or YouTube or whatever, it's about the whole day. So it varies between peak and dip and so on. But when we talk now about video consumption, all of their peak times, the highest consumption is within the 7 to 9 p.m. or 8 to 10 p.m. So everything now shifted within that specific 2 hours time bracket throughout the whole day. Means it's becoming very cluttered for the user in terms of, for the advertiser, and specifically in terms of like who's viewing what and what's the share of viewers that I need to capture. And when I talk about viewers, it's not only limited to TV, it's about video viewership in general. So it's about 7 to 9. It's about the clutter in terms of viewership. It's literally these video platforms, being TV or the others, are fighting to capture the share of audience within that specific time. But then you might ask, okay, but when you talk about TV, it might be older generation. When you talk about VOD, it's a bit different in terms of gender, for example. But surprisingly enough, when you looked at the personas or the individuals that are watching these type of content platforms, they're a bit similar. So in terms of age, in terms of gender, and so on. So again, it means, are they cross-consuming the different content at the same time? I might tell you probably yes. When it comes, for example, to TV, snackable type of content. When it comes to VOD, it's a bit different because it's the same type of consumption when you look at it from a TV perspective or from publisher angle. Then again, it goes back to what Roxanne mentioned. So it's the share of viewers that I need to attract within that specific time, because again, they're all here. So the whole bulk, again, reach at the end. So because either we liked it or not, it's about the reach at the end. You need to reach enough people within the attentive mindset, within the right message to drive and so on. So it becomes very important to dissect that part of the day, adding on top of it the attentiveness. So how we need to make sure that you're putting your ad in the right place within the right context to make sure that the attentiveness is high. And when we talk about attentiveness, what does it mean? I believe we'll tap into this.
I think I just want to add one thing to that, where yes, reach, great, it's a numbers game, but receptivity, you know, this engagement is what we're all after. I mean, if you're talking about video, why do we say outshout the competition? Why do we talk about share of voice, right? Yeah. And I think there's this one quote by Professor Byron Sharp. He's the author of How Brands Grow, and he essentially said that the way that brands grow is for us to secure the maximum, I want to say, share of mind, share of physical space, right? Being the media industry, it's about, okay, why are we trying to capture this attention? Why are we trying to capture all of this reach, right? Is there an action? Is there an intention that we're trying to gauge or get from them? So, you know, if you're talking about prime time, what are you trying to tell people during prime time, right? Is prime time really the right time of the day, the 7 to 9 p.m. So for example, we have a few studies at OMD that talk about the attention golden hour, where it's 7 to 9 a.m. actually, where receptivity is higher. So are you talking about prime time in terms of share of mind for the consumer? Or are you talking about prime time just about people gathering around their screens? So I think it's just asking, what are we trying to show them? Why are we showing this to them at that specific time of the day?
I may, because I have a slightly different point of view on a couple of things. So I think prime time has turned into real time, right? So if we keep kind of boxing consumers into certain hours of the day, and we keep doing the same thing we've been doing for the past 20 years or whatever, we still lack the attention that we're after. I understand that attention by itself does not drive results. However, everything else without attention doesn't really work, right? With building on Roxy's point, if mobiles or the mobile device is the first screen, so we can safely assume that prime time is all the time. It's just a matter of what consumers are using or doing throughout every single hour of the day. And we keep assuming as advertisers, brands, and whatever, that they are doing the same thing. So we start throwing the same message at them all day, the same creative, and we sit there and wonder why it's not working, right? So that's on prime time. The other thing is, there's this belief that we need to start changing together, that some clients, and specifically FMCGs, are only after reach. And that's how all the conversations start with a lot of publishers and a lot of partners. In fact, a lot of CPGs are moving away from the notion of reach only. Doesn't mean reach is not important, but reach by itself will not move the business anymore, because consumers are after experiences. They're not after throwing a bunch of ads at them all day. They're not really waiting for our ads. You know, they're not excited and sitting there and be like, hey, where's the ads?
If only that was the case, right?
So that's.
I want to come back a little bit to something that you said, because I think Matteo might have a different perspective, but Bada, your business is slightly different in that it's more performance-led.
For sure.
So how do you define this?
In our business, you've got two angles. One is building up the brand, you know, to create demand, because demand generation is very important in our line of business. Eventually, we are an entertainment venue, we're an entertainment destination. So whatever you showcase to consumers must show that entertainment value. Otherwise, and I think a very important notion here is that platforms have changed the way that consumers digest content on mobile devices, be it through influencers, through time caps, through multiple tactics. They've changed the way we all digest content. And you're no longer competing with just brands in that space. You're competing with your own family members, with your own friends, with other content creators, with influencers. You're no longer just competing with brands. And I think every brand should realize that the clutter is not just, you know, another, you know, one FMCG against another, one entertainment venue against another. It's actually everything. So you would need to resonate yourself with the wider audiences. And going back to the question of prime time, I think prime time is today, at least from, you know, we're a mobile generation, prime time is your downtime. And everyone's downtimes are very different. You know, he mentioned, I think someone mentioned Roxanne, 7 to 9 a.m. might be asleep by then. But I mean, everyone's downtimes are very different. You know, your downtime could be at 7, my downtime could be at 9, his downtime could be at 1 p.m., you know, waiting for his delivery at work. So it becomes a lot more complex for brands to find everyone's prime time and everyone's downtime in that case, and be able to reach them and to be able to sustain in that frequency.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just want to come back. Matteo, you said that your research suggests that there is a prime time, a physical time between, I think, 7 and 9, where all video channels perform higher in terms of their volume.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, everyone else is kind of going, yeah, that's interesting, but actually, you know, each individual has their own time, they're attentive at different times,
Yeah.
they're consuming content maybe differently at different times of the day, using different channels, etc. What does your research tell us?
Again, yeah. Okay, so when we talk about a volume, which like you need, because again, when it comes to media planning, for example, going from the agency side and so on, you always want to look for different elements that will help you reach the right audience, but at the same time, that will help you from speed to reach perspective, because that's again going to cost you money. So the more you want to, the more you activate to reach people, that's going to cost you more time, more effort, more so on, which in return might also impact the brand at the same time. Again, I'm not disagreeing with Wissam, because yes, there is the prime time is the right time for every single individual, but it's also important to look at the content that's consumed, the platform that's consumed within the right time during the whole day. For instance, if I look at attentiveness versus distraction, okay? So what is consumed in parallel with what? That will at least dictate a bit the attentiveness, but at the same time, it will also, in a way, inform what you need to push and how you need to talk to the users, for example. If you look at the different type of video platform that's consumed, again, from TV, so when I talk video, it's across all. If I talk, let's say, during the day, for instance, so there's different sets of video content or the platform that's consumed while you're doing another activity at the same time. So it does not mean it's not the right content, but it's not the right time. I might be active, yes, I'm consuming the feed, I'm looking at different videos and so on, but I have that short attention span that I'm putting to consume, let's say, a certain content. If I'm consuming a content that's a minute and you plug in a 30-second, they'll be blocked. So by default, even if I'm an advocate for the brand, it's going to be very intrusive to me. Okay, so again, it takes back to the time, the platform, the content, what you're doing at the same time during when you're consuming that content and so on. If I go back a bit to the prime time notion, okay, because again, when we talk about prime time, it's about the volume that you can tap into in order for you to speed your deliveries in terms of reach and so on. Then you can build on top of it. Definitely, it's not only one plan that's going to be only on TV. It's not going to be only on YouTube. It's not going to be only on the emotions. It's not going to be only on the SSP or VOD platform. It's across the board. So when you talk a video plan, it's across the board. And that comes the difficulties in terms of how we need to measure incrementality or extension or complementarity and so on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that the notion of incrementality is interesting. I think you said it's this obsession with reach. And I guess Byron had something to do with that. There is an obsession with reach, and reach is interesting for advertisers because it's easy to understand, easy to measure in some cases, in many cases.
And easy to plan for.
And easy to plan for, exactly. And I think there's a lot of, probably agency planners sitting there going, this is all very well, but I can't determine whether one impression is more valuable than another impression. Where does that come on my spreadsheet? I don't get it. So how do you think about the value of the impression in the first instance, whether that's on one channel or another, whether it's in certain context or another, whether it's lead back media, lead forward media, etc. Maybe from a planning point of view, Roxy, if you could think about that.
Yeah, of course. It all goes down to the why. And I think that's going to be my main narrative for today, right? Why are we measuring this impression? What is the growth that we're after? So if you're talking about incrementality versus complementarity,
That's a very
what a word.
complementarity.
So I believe every channel has a natural ceiling for incrementality, right? It's the basic law of economics. What is your natural point of diminishing returns? And then we look at complementarity. Great. If this is my foundational aspect, then I have to complement with the other touch points. So whether it's like the construct of the videos, whether it's ad length, whether it's the size, whether it's the screen that we're touching upon. And if you're talking about the value of impression, I think the impression is just a baseline that assets marketers have to be able to make everything comparable, right? We even look at, for example, at Omnicom, we have a few proprietary tools that measure out of home based on CPMs and out of home. We also measure CPMs on radio. We even look at CPMs when it comes to video in general, right? It's a baseline, but what does this impression really serve? Are we looking at the right conversion rates? For example, from my impression to my click, or my impression to my view, to my engagement rate, to my sale. So it's really, I think, one of the things that we do from a new business perspective at OMD is really looking at a measurement framework that makes sense, right? You're looking at the consumer outtakes, you're looking at the business outcomes, you're looking at the media outputs, and how does this all correlate? Your paid media is super influenced, right? And I think your media touch points, and there's this one quote that I keep on seeing through a lot of our credentials, which is, if you influence attention, you impact intention, right? So I don't think it's looking at one metric in silo. It's like, what does this impression really do for me in the grander picture? If it's reach, great. If it's more of a performance-led vehicle, great. But ultimately, why am I measuring this? So that's, I think, how I'd answer that.
Build on that maybe a little bit. So one of the challenges that I think a lot of agencies, brands have is that we start building with what we call the fundamentals, which are some of the biggest reach drivers in the industry. Then we start going to more regional and local publishers and start challenging them on incremental reach. And this is something I really cannot really comprehend much, because if we're really doing that, then we don't really need to work with these publishers, right? You can get the reach that you want. It's very easy, right? But I feel like we became too obsessed with reach, which is very important, don't get me wrong, right? But we stopped thinking too much into audience. We talk about audiences, but no one really lands as much for them, because what we end up doing is taking the same creative, right, which we have on Platform X, and start resizing it all the way to what we call our audience strategy, right? And we assume that everyone, in fact, there are brands that plan for 18 to 35. And we assume that the same creative will drive the same emotions and trigger for someone who's 18 years old and someone who's 35 years old. I can assure you that's not the case, right? So that's one of the biggest problems. We keep challenging platforms instead of challenging ourselves and challenging what we're doing in terms of creative, in terms of messaging. And we just take the easy way. Let's take one thing, paintbrush, and then we sit there and look at the KPIs and like, hey, it's not working. So this is what we're trying to change in some organizations, and this is where there's a lot of education and help that needs to come in from the agencies, the publishers side, and the advertising agencies as well, not to take the easy way.
Yeah, I'd like to add on top of it. Yeah.
You have some fans.
One person
All agree.
Anyone else who disagree?
Yeah, I'd like to add on top of what Wissam mentioned, because this is something that we discussed before the panel. It's about what will drive attentiveness before the attentiveness of the creative itself. Okay, because the moment you put it in the right context, again, we're probably maybe talking about some cliche type of words like the premium content, I'd say, that has enough dwell time, scroll pace, scroll depths, whatever, all this kind of metrics that at the end will constitute the whole attention metrics on top of it. If you give that the base for the creative to be well perceived, well placed within an attentiveness that the user is putting into the context that's consuming by default as a halo effect, that will be, again, on the creative itself. But then, going back to Wissam, it's not only about the publisher or the content, because yes, the publisher investing a lot in the content, the premiums of the content, but if the ad is not up to the level of the creativity or the premiumness of, it won't drive any kind of metrics. So even if I'm consuming one of the best content in the world and I'm getting exposed to an ad it's either shitty or good, which you can remember at the end. One of them will play the same, but it has to be up to the level that will drive attentiveness at the same time.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I want to come back to Bala then. I know you talked about that your business is part brand, part performance, and you can talk about brand, but I'm particularly interested in the performance aspect of the business, because I wonder, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I wonder if it's different to what the guys are talking about here. Do you actually care about attention, or do you just care about sales? Which is the ultimate goal of attention, I guess.
It's both, because attention influences sales. Eventually, again, as a destination, if you want to visit a hotel or a theme park or, the kind of attractions that we offer, you need to create that intention, you need to create that demand, you need to attract people. So it's not really, I'm not selling a product on a shelf, I'm not selling something that you can just walk around and buy. It's something that you would do in your own space, in your own leisure time. So you need to create that attention, you need to create that demand. And just going back to what the guys were saying and back to performance versus brand, I personally believe gone are the days of linear campaign planning. When it comes to, we've all seen, upper funnel, mid funnel, lower funnel tactics. You develop a 60-second or a 2-minute hero piece, and then cut downs for consideration and whatever other cut downs for conversion or statics or whatever. That linear thought is completely, I think, out of place. I stopped doing it 2.5 years ago, and I think, ever since we stopped doing it, we started seeing an outcome. I can have a hero piece, that's working on reach, that's working optimized towards attention. I can have 7, 8, 10 other pieces that are working simultaneously in the market, saying something completely different, and they don't talk to each other. If you look at them, you'd be like, how is this the same brand, from whatever, Kevin to this? But eventually, this is what works. You need to cater to different audiences. You need to cater to different demographics. It's a completely different ballgame. And when it comes to reach itself, reach is not a wrong tactic, in my opinion. In fact, reach is very important. It's just that how you use reach and what are your KPIs from reach. It has to meet certain criteria. If it does not meet these criteria, there's no point in it. Unless the reaction from reach is higher than average engagement rates, or higher view-through rates, or higher brand metrics when it comes to awareness and consideration, for example, or brand buzz, or ad recall, or what have you, there's just no point in it. So your creative needs to work harder for reach than the planning itself.
It's starting to sound a little expensive. So we've got multiple different channels, we've got multiple different executions against multiple different audiences. How do you square that with either with brand or with performance, for that matter? There's a lot of stuff going on here. This is getting really pricey.
Yeah, fine. I can take that. So if we expect, okay, let's go back to attention. We say people pay attention. Attention is something that's earned and paid. We can't expect people to pay attention if we're not working hard to earn it. Okay, so it's very simple. If we need to work hard to adapt and to really do the right thing for different platforms, we can't expect people to come in and just throw money at us, right? That's not going to happen. So that's one of the things. The other thing is, what happened is, and I'm personally against the notion of people are having less and less attention span. I think that's really changing, meaning people are actually paying more attention, but they're being very selective about what they want to pay attention to. You can see people sitting there watching a series for a full day. That's attention, right? But they are selecting that they want to pay attention to that kind of activity or that platform, right? So what happened is, as people became actually smarter about what they want and more selective, we started seeing, I would say, diminishing KPIs. And instead of changing ourselves and readapting and looking into the big elephant in the room, what we did is we started downsizing the duration of our ads, assuming that, yeah, that will work. Let's do it in a 6-seconder. Let's put all the message in a 6-seconder. Let's push it out there, and that's gonna solve it. So we didn't change the game. We changed some of the rules for ourselves. So when we look at the KPIs, it makes us feel better. But does it really drive sales? No. This is the ultimate objective, not just engagement. Listen, we're all in the business of selling goods and services. So it needs to drive a certain ROI. And the more we do this, in many cases, I'm not saying always, this does not really drive sales. You're just trying to stitch and,
Does it not depend on the channel or the way in which the...
No, not really, because I can argue that if you have a great piece of content that's being served to the right audience, right? Because so many times, I assure you that many of the people sitting here in this room get ads about things they completely don't care about, right? So if you care about it, it's being served in the right context, right? You will be willing to engage or to spend time or pay attention, right? But if we assume that if I bombard you with 500 million impressions all the time, all day, with the same ad, then eventually you're gonna pay attention. I don't know if that works.
And back to something Wissam was saying, and I think it's very important. we need to look outside of the media reports and outside of, we have agencies and brands, for the last several years saying, long form content's dead, go for short form content. It's 15 seconds, it's 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And I've always asked my team and my partners this, would you prefer to have 12 seconds of viewership on a 60-second ad, or you prefer to have 5 seconds on 15? One's going to, display maybe 33% on a media report. The other one's going to display 20%. So from a success metric, you'd look at this, be like, all right, 30%, 33% average view-through rate. That's great. But it's actually 5 seconds of 15. What did you get out of that? Were you able to capture attention? Were you able to sell? Were you able? Did it incentivize your business in any way or form? Or actually that 60-second piece, that had an average view-through rate of 12 seconds or 15 seconds or what have you, actually had more cut-through and impact with the audiences. So it's really looking at metrics in very different ways. And like Wissam said, it's content is hero and content is king, and making yourself relevant to the audiences. Because we're in a day and age, audiences, and sorry to say, they don't give a shit about what your brand is. You need to say it in a way that's relevant to them, in a platform that is very contextual to them. They don't care, that you have this and you have that, and it's how you say it. And eventually, even influencers these days, or content creators, or people generally use brands as a backdrop. And brands need to learn to use themselves as a backdrop, and not just go out there and spoon feed people information that they're not interested in hearing.
Popular panel today. Yeah, let's see. Is this true from an agency planning point of view? Is this the challenges that you have, that you've been measured on the wrong metrics? I think that's pretty much what we're saying.
It's not the wrong metrics, it's just interpreting them in a wrong way.
Perhaps, or in a way that's not helpful. Is this what's happening?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with everything that my co-panelists are saying today. I think we're kind of saying the same thing. It's great. We're talking about specific time of day. We're talking about the length of the ad, but we're all still debating what are we going to say to them, right? The length of the ad is irrelevant. If I can say what I need to say in 6 seconds versus 15 in a vertical format to the right person, does that really matter? These are all really trivial at the end of the day, right? Whether Brother was talking about this whole linear view of a 60-second where you prospect and then you have the short-term message and you retarget. Yes, we know it's effective because you're also building frequency. But in that frequency, are we actually impacting or influencing the intention that we want our consumers to take, right? And I think that's one thing we forget, where, okay, great, we're looking at the lens of this consumer, 18 to 35, let's say 35 plus, right? But do we really understand why they're consuming certain pieces of content? I remember, when we were doing an audience segmentation workshop, and we're talking about fathers who are 50 plus year old in the UK, you have Prince Charles and you have Ozzy Osbourne in a side-by-side comparison. Great, they meet your demographic split, but their intention, the way that they receive or consume things are completely different. So, to kind of say, and I think we talked about it earlier, about the impression, great, it's a baseline for us to make everything comparable, but does that really impact the bottom line? Are we really looking at the right measurement frameworks? Are we really trying to understand that the sales driver, yes, attention is, in a conceptual manner, the basis or the foundation of being a sales driver, right? Because even if you think about it in school, if you don't pay attention in school, you fail. You don't pay attention on the road, you get into a car accident, right? So I think what my co-panelists, and I agree with them completely, is yes, there is a certain time of day, there is a certain mindset that we need to tap into. When are our consumers most receptive? Do we really understand what they're able to receive and consume at that point of the day? And whether we're talking to them in a 6, 10, 15 second ad length, are we saying the right things, right?
It's interesting, media panel says creative is king. Of course.
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying? Are we saying that the creative is king, whatever the saying is, or are we saying the environment in which the creative is shown is important?
The message and the purpose.
It's
message
both.
and the purpose of the
It's
specific
both.
ad.
It's both. You have to have the right context, the right audience, with the right creative to drive. Because again, it might be the best creative, but I'm consuming a content that's not related. My mindset is not related. I'm an advocate for the brand now. It's not work. It's not gonna work for me.
Yeah.
So it's about the context itself, the premiumness of the context. And again, when I talk about premiumness, we talk about the attentiveness that we need to put and look at for the content, plus the right ad with the right form, with the right duration at the same time.
So if I think about what Matthew is trying to say and Reese and Brother are trying to say, if we're in the business of moving people and driving brand growth or driving, because essentially every product or service we sell is either a functional need that's being served or an emotional need that's being served, right? And yes, creative is king, I want to say. Media is the queen probably, but if you're thinking about a piece of art that is so great and so glamorous, if it's not showcased in the right museum when reaching the right people and moving the right people, then I think we're not saying that one is more important than the other, but it's a complementary thing.
I love the analogy of the museum, because it's kind of bringing people in to see it in the right environment.
If you're talking about, driving reach, if you're talking about moving people, right? And I think and we're trying to move the needle in sales. We're trying to move the needle in brand growth, right?
So I agree. I mean, my panelists are saying that you need to reach the right audience and right context and all that. Now, the problem with that is so many conversations don't really end up transacting, because a lot of agencies and brands would be discussing the right audience, the right context, and precision with certain publishers, and then your reach becomes smaller, right? Because you don't have a lot of options to target the right audience out there. It's very easy, again, to drive the massive reach. And then when the reach becomes smaller, the discussions become, but hey, your reach is too small. And then there's this fear that advertisers have, or agencies. So we all talk about it. We all talk about how important it is to target the right audience, but we have to accept that sometimes your right audience on certain platforms or with a lot of criteria that you put in is limited reach, right? You can't easily identify them. That's why one of the things that you need to invest more and more in is your first-party data. So this is what's going to become your kind of scalable reach in the future. But we need to accept the fact that you can't get reach everywhere. It's very important. It's the base, but you cannot get it everywhere. So once we accept that, we can move on.
I agree on the first party data element, but even at the same time, when you talk about, you have to have the balance between the reach and the precision marketing. Okay, so you need to make sure that you're driving performance and any kind of performance on being on a brand metric or sale or media metrics. But how I need to target my right audience in a way at scale, hitting the right behavioral or whatever or contextual audience that you need. So that's why, first party data will play a role, but at the same time, not all publishers are equipped with first party data. Right? So when you talk about the majority of the publishers in the region, yes, few of them are driven by first-party data, but then again, that first-party data, if it's available, it's not scalable at the same time. So that's when you start looking about, okay, what kind of other solutions that might bring to the table in order for me to drive precision marketing at scale that might drive the better performance. So I'm not trying to be, again, so that's why we start looking for different solutions. So should I move to more declared type of audiences where you bridge two different technologies together, where you're creating precise audiences? And these precise audiences are built, scaled through lookalike modeling. Again, there will always be that element of, yes, it's not 100%, but at least it will take us as close as possible to reach and precise at the same time.
Thanks, Matteo. I'm glad you said that, because actually I want to come back to each of the panelists and ask you about something practical that the audience can do to address some of these opportunities and challenges that we've discussed today. But before I do that, I just want to see if there's any questions or comments from the audience, because I know you've clearly had some opinions about what the guys have been talking about today. So if there's any questions, now's a good time to raise them. We do have one or two. Is there a microphone or something for them? Thank you.
Hello, panelists. Thank you for the insightful discussion. So I'm from the creative side of the industry, and my question is that where do you actually draw the line between quantity and quality of content? Because oftentimes we see brands just coming up with new things and testing the metrics before really allowing themselves or giving them the space to present, because if you see the influencer space also, there are a lot of people who keep putting out content for like years, and suddenly after 2 years, they're a piece of their content or their video will just get viral for like different reasons. Maybe, that's through trial and error. And then they already have this whole bunch of content on their feed. So that's how, they gain the popularity. This is also known as binge marketing. If you notice, like Netflix, they just drop like a whole series with, like 10 episodes. And then almost 80% of the people will watch the 10 episodes for like 2 days or 3 days straight. So here, there's like a slight difference between.
Sorry to interrupt you. You're interested in the kind of quality versus quantity.
Yes, exactly.
And how do you determine whether that's the right mix?
Yeah.
I can answer that, and especially that you come from a creative background and a creative agency, it should be quality first. Creative agencies don't have the bandwidth and don't have the tools and the capabilities to fight, content creators or to take on content makers or to produce quantities like everybody else in that space. So if you go for quantity, you're going to get smashed. There's no way around it. It has to be quality first. Produce that one piece of content that can make yourself, can make you or make the brand stand out in that cluttered space. That's all you need to do.
There's some other questions ahead there.
Hi, so my question to you is, how do you feel about ads always being associated as a burden, and especially on video platforms? So the concept of ad-free platform has become such a positive thing, so YouTube Premium or Shahid Premium, or so how do you feel about ads having this negative correlation and people being willing to pay money to not watch ads?
Yeah, I can take that. So I think we should respect that first. We should respect the fact that some people want to have an ad-free experience, but we need to think about ways to make it okay, again, for us to show them ads. There's ways around it, right? First of all, we need to accept it. We need to accept that this is something that's been growing. Now, that means we cannot keep doing the same thing just like we always do and then expect it to work. That means there are ways where you need to incorporate your brands in certain shows, for example. Like a lot of brands are doing with Shahid Originals and stuff like that, for example, right? So there's always opportunities to really embed your brand in a seamless way, only if it fits, please. So, so that's one way to do it. Now, the other thing is there's a lot of reward-based ads models that are out there, which could be gaining more and more attention, I would say, from advertisers, where people are willing to watch an ad in return for content. So it's a reality, we have to live with it, and there's several ways to tackle it.
I think that's precisely the point there, is it's a value exchange between the content and the consumer. So if there's a good value exchange, consumers are okay with it. If there's not a good value exchange, they're not. And this comes down to what Brother was talking about, the quality. If the ads are of a high quality, if the content is of a high quality, if it's relevant to me, I'm much more likely to be okay with that than if it's not relevant, it's not high quality, and it's spam, effectively. So I think people do get that there is a value exchange, and Netflix is a good example where they've realized that yes, at the moment, a lot of their current customers, their value exchanges, I'm prepared to pay a little extra and I don't want the ads. But there's a whole bunch of other customers who go, well, that's one of my streaming services. So on that particular case, I'm happy to pay for some, to pay a slightly lower fee, but I'm prepared to trade that off against receiving some of the ads, as long as they're relevant and targeted. So it's a business model construct between the consumer and the advertiser. And I think if you think about it like that, you would treat the consumer with a lot more respect about the type of advertising that's being produced and about the way it's targeted to them, which I guess is kind of the key point of what the panelists have been talking about today. It's about the right, it's the old, what's the right place, right time, right content.
It shouldn't feel like an ad these days.
Yeah, it should feel like something that, yes, I'm okay receiving this because it gives me value. And that's, I think, the key point. There was a question over here, but I think we're about to run out of time.
I think we're running out.
Not only are we about to run, we're totally run out of time.
I'm afraid so.
Well, that's good. Thank you very much, panelists.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thanks, guys. That was fascinating. Now, these guys will be around for a while, so I do encourage you to catch them. And also, definitely the next panel as well is going to put another sort of angle on this. We're going to be looking at much more on digital and social, neatly called thank you. Neatly called full funnel advertising. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming our moderator, Tasif Butt, who is the Regional Director of Performance and Retail Media at regionally. And Tasif is joined by Jennifer Fisher, who's the Chief Innovation Officer at TBWA RAD. Anna Germanos, who is the Head of CPG Retail and E-commerce at META. And Jacqueline Al-Baghdadi, who's the, sorry, I butchered your surname, Jacqueline, who is the Senior Group Brand Building and Strategy Director at Alshire Group. Now, thanks for joining us, guys. I'm not going to take any more of your time, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We'll get straight into it. I think we'll do, if anyone wants to do some quick introductions, we've already had them done briefly. So I head up retail media and performance media for across the region.
I'm Jennifer. I'm Chief Innovation Officer at TWA, creative agency, if you don't know us. And I supervise social, digital, content creation, strategy, and business. And I'm very passionate about content orchestration, so happy to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna. I'm the head of consumer packaged goods, retail and e-commerce at Meta, previously known as Facebook. And I've spent, so I've been with the group for more than 2 years and spent more than 4 years with, before that with Google. So working also on YouTube. So working with video for the past 6-7 years in MENA.
Hi everyone, my name is Jacqueline. I'm with retail for the last 1.5 years, but 16 years before that, I come from Procter & Gamble. So before that in the FMCG world, where it doesn't come from performance marketing. So from the top funnel, moved to all the way to the lower funnel. Right before that as well, before P&G, I come from a media background. So from Starcom, from whoever is from the media agencies. So pretty mixed background. So very interesting topic.
Great, thank you. So the first panel is a pretty good segue into this one. One of the things that kind of stood out for me in the first panel was something that Roxanne mentioned, where she gave a reference to what it was like in school, where you pay attention to certain things and you're good at it. So what I take from that is, well, from my own experiences, everyone's selective with the things that they pay attention to. Right, so if you paid attention to your favorite subjects in school, you tend to be better at them. So my first kind of question is, when you're thinking about the consumer, are you also thinking about what type of content you're putting in front of them? Because I would say a lot of content that gets produced is very much of a push message. We're encouraging some sort of a sell, some sort of a desired action, but are we trying to kind of, build trust in the brand when it comes to developing content? Not sure who wants to take that.
Sure, I'm happy to. Well, of course, trust is important, but I think even before that, any communication always starts with the audience that we want to talk to, understanding their needs, their aspirations, how we can connect with them, not just to sell, but also emotionally, and maybe first emotionally, because if we don't, then the brand's connection does not happen. So that brand love, brand trust, is really the first stage of connecting with consumers, and only then we have kind of the permission to sell them something. So any kind of orchestration really starts with the audience and where they are in their journey, what are the key moments, even the live stages, and all of this allows us to then bring to life the relevant content that will bring the trust.
Yeah, that's a really good point, kind of understanding what type of audience is. So I'm obviously from a media agency side, so a lot of briefs that I tend to get are, it's a very broad type of audience, but I think one thing that Ewan's pretty good at is dissecting that audience even further. So you have your, for example, you receive a brief that says, I want to reach Gen Z, but then it's also important to understand what types of personas fit within that, and where you should be reaching each of those audiences at what stage of the funnel. So which leads on to my next question for Jacqueline is, when over the last couple of years, retailers have been focusing specifically on performance. Now that we're hopefully out of the pandemic, how do you see branding coming back into play?
I can start and don't end. So I'm very passionate about that. No, I think it's a journey because it's very premature, and most of retail, I think, in the region is very premature in this area. So if you look at what retailers have been serving consumers over the last year since e-commerce started specifically and started to play in the digital space, it's a buy me now, buy me please message. This is what every message is saying. And it's a different alteration of it. Buy me now, buy me please, 60% off, a code, all the alteration of it in different shapes and forms, with a picture, with a video, but it's always saying the same exact message and nothing else. So obviously this is lower funnel. And I think because the industry is a bit premature, there is this fear of, if I move upper in the funnel, what does that mean to my annual sales? Do I then need to wait 2 years or 6 months? Show me the money. Okay, fine. You want me to speak with the consumers and shift them from awareness to consideration when? Will this give me results in 6 months, 3 months? Just tell me when and how much. And I think it comes with the maturity of the industry as well. And the second piece is an education of what do we say? Because the biggest thing is we start to educate, and with the media agencies and honestly with the digital publishers as well, the brand teams and the marketeers and the business leaders on full funnel and the importance to shift the consumer mindset, because in retail you sell luxury. It's not a commodity. People don't have to shop. People don't have to go out and eat. It's a luxury. But then before we shift their mindset and they start to move the money and expect results, what is it that we're saying as well? Because if I take the same exact message that says, buy me now, buy me please, and start to give a brief, can you please take this and plan it full funnel, because this happens sometimes, it's a disaster. So it's the what are we saying that needs to change first. What's the content that deserves to be across the funnel? And then really plan across the funnel and so that it's impactful, and have a story to the consumer. We don't have a story today.
So when we're talking about the use of video, would you say video is important at every stage of the funnel? And also keeping in mind what, the guys were talking about before, where I agree it's not really like a stacked funnel model now. There's some research that's been done where you've got the top of the funnel and then you enter this thing called the messy middle, where the journey is a lot more fragmented. So the type of messaging that you're trying to deliver to the consumer, it becomes a bit more difficult to deliver that relevant message depending on that behavior. So it's important to track that behavior in order to reach them.
And I think video is very important in the consideration and awareness piece, because it gives you a story, it gives you an aspiration. A still photo of a jacket does not make me feel necessarily that I want it. but it's a matter of what do you put in the video, and as well how does it fit with the platform. This idea of one paintbrush. I come from an FMCG where I used to do a copy and it lives for 3 months. No longer the case, cannot be in retail, cannot be in the new world. So it needs to be smartly done that fits for use for the platform, for where the consumer is looking, and it needs to be as well breaking through the clutter. Consumers don't have the time, don't have the patience, don't care. I love what Wissam said about they don't really care, they don't want to see what we have to say.
Which brings me on to another point, is tracking the KPIs of these. So typically when people tend to run video campaigns, it's more of like the hard metrics, the ones that you get out of your platforms where you're looking at your CPVs and your view through rates and your completion rates and things like that. But I think when it comes to the use of video, especially when we're talking so much about the type of messaging, are we delivering the right message? How do you find that stuff out, right? You need to be measuring metrics that you may not necessarily get directly from your platform. So, or in some cases, yes, like my point is doing things like brand studies and intent studies, also using, technology such as double verify to measure attentive metrics to see, whether a video was actually played with a sound on, viewability and things like that. Is that something as a brand you would kind of consider?
Yeah, and I think it's something that I can pass as well to Anna. It's the only way we can step into that space is to start to measure beyond the media vanity measures, because no business leader is interested in the click-through rate, the VTR, the CPM, the CTR. As a business leader in retail, I want to see the money when they're coming. And one of the things that we started to do, start to measure brand health tracking. That's number one, but that's take a bit longer and it's a quarterly, it's not really timely. And the other very interesting thing that we're looking at with Meta, for example, in Ashaya, is that we're doing a pilot on marketing mix modeling as well, so that we can really show the business on few pilots when you do across the funnel in real time, what's the impact. So we have few learnings, and there might be actually cross learnings between categories and brands.
So maybe I can comment on this. I think measuring the effectiveness and efficiency of video is very important. And you can do it across 3 levels. So one is obviously the easier one is the media KPIs. And you name it. It can be viewability, view-through rate, completion rate, CPM, CPV, etc. What's very important in this is making sure you're measuring apples to apples from one platform to the other. We don't make it easy for anyone, right? If you on YouTube is 30 seconds, if you on Meta is 3 seconds, if you on other platforms, it can be different. So when media agencies are reporting, and I think, and we've been, accompanying them throughout this education journey on digital, is to make sure we measure apple to apple. The second layer is more closer to the business, but it's not yet as close as sales, is the brand. And here, every publisher, I think, has already tools embedded to measure brand lift studies across any stage of the funnel, and as well as conversion lift studies, which are measuring also the impact. And thirdly, what is most important is the sales, because at the end of the day, this is what we're trying to achieve with the media communication. And the measurement, especially on lower funnel, has evolved a lot. While with CPGs and FMCG and branding industry, media mix modeling has been in the known for some time, but then you do a one-off on one brand in one market. It takes you 3 months. You get the result and you're already, you have to wait 2 years until you get a second rerun of the MMM. It's not bad, but it's not ideal. What MMM has evolved for the past 2 years is that it's become more of a real time. And the biggest performance player around the globe, whether it's in gaming, whether it's in e-commerce, whether in retail, are now getting educated on MMM, especially with the changes of signals in the ecosystem, with iOS and everything happening. MMM is becoming the most reliable solution to get a view of the return on your advertising spend. And there are models today being built within the organization. So within e-commerce player, they are doing it in-house, or with SaaS partners that are available today that can give you MMM results running in real time that makes sense to check on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, which will give you this visibility. So I think this is, these are the different layers of measurements. And ideally, you would want to go to the third layer that is measuring the impact of sales.
Okay, great. Yeah, so market mix modeling is obviously very important, as you guys mentioned as well. There's, wider things that you can also do. I know this is about video, but just for informative purposes, you can also measure your offline activities as well to kind of measure your full funnel marketing model, which will measure the impact of, what your wider awareness activities, what impact that's having on your bottom line. So moving on to trends, what kind of trends are you seeing in a video landscape?
So video as a format is, as you all know, is definitely growing. Why? Because it's an entertaining format. It's easy to digest, and people love watching video. So globally, we have seen the average consumption per day has increased from 1 hour per day to 4 hours a day since April 2020. Now, this has definitely been accelerated by the pandemic, but this is even more relevant in MENA. MENA as a region over-indexes on video consumption across all platforms. And why so? Because we have a population that is very well concentrated in youth, and we have a very high mobile penetration. So which makes MENA an ideal marketplace for video buying. So these are trends we have seen on video. On Meta specifically, we have different platforms that cater to video, and we have approximately 3.5 billion users every month on our platforms globally, and video accounts for 50% of the time spent on our platform. So here I think it's very important to define what video means. And today, if you ask what is video, I bet you we don't have a single definition of this format, because the format has evolved. It is no longer, traditionally video was, a big screen where you watch, it's unidirectional, consumer get the message with no way to engage back with this video and this particular ad. With digital video coming, this engagement has been a bit improved. However, today, with all the platform providing video, we have different forms. So we have what we call social video, and it is as important as online video and offline video, okay? So today on Meta, I think our video, when we talk about video, our video value proposition is defined for different viewing modes. If you are in a hurry looking for snackable content, you have like feeds, stories, and reels that can entertain you instantaneously. However, if you are in a longer viewing mode, then you can go into in-stream and live and Instagram video, for example, where the user is looking for a longer viewing mode. So I think as advertisers, one, they leverage video as a very important medium and format, because it's a video that has the engagement with the consumer and they can use it to tell the stories. But I think they have to cater to different viewing mood of the consumers and cater not only to video as traditionally understood, but to online video in its longer form and to social video in its shorter form.
Talking about Reels specifically, which is one of the more recent formats that have been released, how do you see the adoption of that kind of benefiting advertisers?
Okay, so Reels has been launched on Instagram. Reel ads have been launched in MENA on Instagram since August 2021. And a couple of months ago, we launched Reels on Facebook. So Reels is available on Facebook and Instagram today. It is the #1 engagement growth driver for Instagram. It is booming massively. And specifically in MENA, when we launched the ads in August 2021, we're very happy to work with advertisers that have jumped on the occasion to test Reels. And today I'm very proud, because we usually hear stories from the US, from the UK, from more mature market, but MENA has been the first market to launch Reel case studies globally. So we're very happy with partners. Al-Shaya is not yet a public case study, but I can talk about the public ones with Sephora, with Azadea in fashion, with in tech with Samsung, with in telecom with Huawei STC, for example. What we have seen is that the addition of Reels to any communication allows you to tap into new audiences. Reels is the discovery engine for brands. It allows you to tap into very much engaged young audiences that will allow you, it has on average 50% additional lift on any brand KPI, even more so with youth and Gen Z. It over-indexes on the young population. And efficiently, from a media perspective, the blended cost of your campaign is 30 to 60% lower because the CPMs of Reels are still very efficient. So this is when it comes to branding communication. With Joey, for example, we tested basically the acquisition, lift per acquisition. We have seen 67% reduction in cost of acquisition from adding Reels to the campaign. So this proves that Reels is not only an upper and mid in traditional understanding funnel format for upper and middle funnel, but also performs very well on conversions. And going back to the point where do we still think upper, mid, and lower, I think we're in a much more circular type of, where the consumer is. Today, if you're on Instagram, for example, sorry, I talk about my platform, but on any other social platform, you could see, discover a product, right? And directly click on it, like it, and buy it. So the funnel has shrunk into a couple of seconds because of how the path to purchase is very well integrated today and more seamless. Whereas for other products, yes, we still have to build the awareness and build the consideration. So the funnel is no longer, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. It's much more fluid today, where it can really collapse to a few seconds after discovery, basically.
Yeah, and I think the journey becomes a lot more repetitive as well. Depending on the type of product, you could, what through the research that we've done at we tend to see, for certain products, there is a typical user journey. But what you might find is people retracting back to step one and going through that process again several times before they actually make that purchase.
I have one question, and maybe Anna or to Jennifer, honestly, on Reels, because there are some platforms that are amazing, honestly, when the content is right. And aside from those success stories, what are the content that didn't work on the Reels? Because I see some content on some brands that is horrific, and I would really say, please do not try with these ones because the content is a disaster.
It's getting spicy.
Sure, I mean, generally speaking, right, it all comes down to making sure you have the right fit, right? The right fit for the format, right? You tap into the trends of Reels, the transitions, what the audiences are actually looking for when they're on the Reels. It needs to be very visually captivating. And the brands who essentially just do a KB version that's animated and put into a Reel, fail, right?
That's exactly what I got as a request of few bottles, animated, and with few text going, we want to test Reels. No, you're not testing anything. No, we're not going to go for Reels.
It's like with any new format that's launched, right? You need to really understand the context, to the point of our earlier panelists, and make sure that it's really relevant to what the audience is looking for in that specific context.
Great. So moving on from discussion of Reels, question for you, Jennifer. How do you see the wide range of formats in the market today helping you reach your advertising goals?
Well, I think it's very great opportunity, right? The wide range of formats that we have, because of course it allows us to have a much deeper match, let's say, between the objectives, the audience, the type of content you want to be creating. It also allows us to have a lot more interesting types of narratives, whether it's, inverted narratives, used to focusing a lot more on visuals, like playing with sound, depending on the formats that you're playing with. So it just is a huge opportunity to really tap into all these different moments, that happen in the journey, whether we're, whichever way we're looking at the funnel or at the always on way of converting.
So it took around about 20 years for the world to fully adopt radio, about 10 years for the world to fully adopt TV, 5 years for them to adopt the internet. Now there's talk around there being around 3 years for people to adopt the metaverse and things like that. So beyond mobile, where do you see the opportunity kind of going?
Well, of course, the platforms like VR platforms, like not Oculus anymore, Quest 2, are really great for that. And I think there's a number of opportunities. If we just stick to video, if we don't even go into like 3D environments, even just enhancing video with spatial sound, for example, creates a really immersive kind of engagement for users, creating 360 content. I mean, there's already great inspiration out there, whether you want to get close to sharks or like have a NASA adventure, you can really get this, the potential of immersive content. And even if you've done that, I don't do that sometimes, like creating like 360 of like your holidays, just you really sense the potential for this really immersive way to engage the audiences. So this is very much the next stage for video.
Okay, great. That's all the questions that I have for the panelists. I think I'll pass over to you guys if you have any specific questions that you'd like to ask. Can we get a microphone for the gentleman at the front?
Given what you said, I'm curious, would you say then that creativity is no longer king, but context is?
Yeah, I would not say that. Actually, a lot of studies show that the creative and the messaging is still the number one impact on results at any stage of the funnel or the journey. So I think it needs to be a lot more, let's say, sophisticated in the way we plan it to make sure we tap, really at the different audiences, the different segments, the different moments, and so on. But that just the fight for attention is the biggest fight, right? Because essentially indifference is the biggest enemy. So to catch the attention, it comes down to the creative, whichever platform you're in, whichever format you're in. If you cannot catch the attention, then you've missed the game entirely.
Just to build on that, honestly, we were just in consumer research, and one of the consumers said something that was very interesting. And she was saying, I'm on a skip mode until proven otherwise. And I loved it because this whole idea of the consumer saying, my finger is here, so the mode of the consumer is, I'm gonna skip you. So unless somebody stops me, and this comes with the content and the creative. So unless something makes me not skip, I'm skipping. So it's those first 3 seconds that will define whether somebody's interested or, sorry, oops. It's either this or this or...
I think content is king. Definitely, it is the number one impact of effectiveness of the campaigns, and then followed by the way you distribute this content, which is all about the media. However, in online video specifically, and maybe talking about the platform, what we have done is we have empowered our algorithm with artificial intelligence to improve the context. So, and the way, why is our video, why people come on our platform to watch video is because it's relevant to them. This doesn't undermine at all the content, but having the right content, and this is what has been said in the previous panel, to the right person at the right time based on behavior and interest is what makes the consumer come back again. So the way our algorithm work is around, like, I'm a previous consultant, so I love frameworks. So 3 C's. One is to connect, get the attention of the consumer, complete, likelihood to complete the video, and the third C is come back. So if you crack the first 2, then the likelihood of them coming back will happen. And that's why my feed is different than Jacqueline's feed, is different than Jennifer's feed, because it is built based on my behavior and my interest. And this is what makes the context and the relevancy important. But definitely having the right content remains crucial.
Just to add to that, I think it's important nowadays to also have content that creates a two-way dialogue with the consumer, to kind of make them feel like they have some sort of sense of ownership or a stake in what's being delivered to them.
Maybe I can add on this. So the engagement is very important, and there are very low-hanging fruits from a creative perspective that you can add in your communication today that gets this engagement. So for example, every time you add a polling ad on the story, you add a question, do you want this or this? Or even if it's not a choice, Do you want this? Yes, hell yes, you know. Just having the consumer stop reading this question, pressing on it, this is engagement. There are, for example, smart stories, like we've done an example with Coca-Cola, whereby, you know, tapping onto next by stories feel like a wheel where they're choosing and then they get a prize. So this is all creativity, and this is all hacking tools or small things we can do, low-hanging fruits that can increase the engagement. And this is how brands create the engagement with the consumers.
And maybe something to add to that. Now, today we're talking about zero-party data, right? And so engagement becomes more and more important, right? Things like conversational, for example, new opportunities to get people to volunteer their data, to give us, you know, more specific information about their desire, their aspirations that are really related to us, and that allows us to customize this conversation and this engagement in something that's uniquely relevant to them. And so that's where engagement becomes even more important than before.
Yeah, that I completely agree with what Jennifer just said. Conversational commerce is definitely something that we're seeing more and more of, where, you know, especially online, you're kind of within the online communities, as long as you can generate conversation around your brand and product. And it goes back to my earlier point about building trust. And once you build that trust, and all of these things kind of come full circle, right? Which kind of leads me on to another question of my own is, what role do you guys see with content creators in this space? And just to clarify for everyone else, there is a big difference between content creators and influencers. Right? Content creators create the content. Influencers tend to push the message out.
I think content creators are very important to the platform, and they to any communication, and they have proven really to drive engagement with brands and for advertisers. So so it's definitely a channel that should be considered, especially in categories where such like beauty, fashion, and even, you know, tech, and anywhere where there is an element of persuasion that can be driven by the content creator. However, what is important is to properly measure, right, the ROAS, or return on advertising spend, of the creator. Because sometimes you get to pay a lot of money for a macro creator or influencer, and the return on advertiser spend doesn't justify the investments. So really balancing this, if your ultimate objective is to drive sales at an efficient cost, we have to measure very carefully and properly attributing, because sometimes you pay the ad to drive the traffic, and then you also pay the influencer. Let's say they have a coupon code, so you also pay the coupon code. So you're triple dipping, right? Ad, coupon code, influencer. But your measurement gives all the attribution to the influencer, for example. Are you measuring it right in this case? No, because you already paid two other things to get to there. So having the right attribution and the right measurement is very important to really measure the ROAS on influencers and creators.
Can I just add one probably not very popular point of view? I think they're doing extremely well in the region when they're on their own. A lot of industry is ruining that space when it comes to advertising. I was judging in the content creator FAs, and the amount of content that advertisers and brands have created that should be crucified probably by someone globally telling marketers to stop what you're doing.
It's a very valid point, because in other markets such as the UK, there are regulations. There is a set way of,
we can't do this neither to the content creators, neither to the brands. Honestly, we need to be more responsible as industry leaders. So the amount of things, I remember I was giving insights to my team from the event, and I was like, guys, I feel like I'm in the 1980s watching telesales on a lot of the content that I'm watching. It can't be the case. We're ruining the content creators' credibility, where it's some of the content becomes extremely, really telesales in the 1970s and 80s. So the advertisers, the brand teams, the marketeers, and honestly, they need to engage as well the creative agencies, because obviously this starts to become a creator, brand manager job of, can you do this to me? And they start to become, so the creative, there is no creative there, and there is a lot of, I don't know, just on the go. So I think in general, there is a huge maturity that needs to happen in that space for it to be really, and some industry, honestly, are doing very well. Food industry and F&B in general, nice work, honestly, and usually very creative one. FMCGs and retailers, and I come from both.
Okay, so lots of work to be done there. Sorry, Jennifer.
Maybe that goes back as well to what was said in the earlier panel that actually maybe I disagreed with, which was about consistency. I think consistency in like brand tone and how the brand comes across is actually really important. Where you can have multiple messages, you do need to have this consistency.
Yeah.
Whether 100%. You work with
100%.
content creators, you're creating performance content, wherever you are in this funnel, you need to represent your brand and respect it and do justice to what you've done.
It ties back to your brand purpose, of course.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Do we have time for any other questions?
I think we're going to have to wrap up, I'm afraid. I'm getting the big signals from the back. Leaving wanting more.
All right, well, thank you everyone for today, and thank you, ladies, for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. That was, catch these guys before they go. There's some really... One last thing, Anna, where can we find out more? You said that you've got real studies here for the coming out of the region. Where can we find them?
Yeah, they are published online. They are available. They are published online on the internet. These are the public case studies that I've mentioned. So you can watch them. You can find them just by searching for them.
Thanks a lot, everybody. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you to our panelists.